Hey, what's up? Sebentine here, taking a look at the 2D MMORPG Dungeon Fighter Online, a game that was initially released back in 2010 under the publishing company Nexon. The game was shut down back in 2013. It has since been rebooted by the original developers Neople as a global version of the game to coincide with the Korean version and is currently in open beta. First and foremost, I'd like to touch on Dungeon Fighter being called an MMO. While it is an online game, there are very little multiplayer interactions. The game feels more like it's a lobby-based dungeon game where you see hundreds of players standing in what is essentially a lobby or a hub world, and then going into a match or a dungeon with a maximum of 4 players. Something that actually reminded me a bit of how Bungie's Destiny does it and still calls it an MMO. That aside though, let's talk about the gameplay. Dungeon Fighter at its basics comes down to receiving quests from the local town residents, then jumping into dungeons to cause a ruckus with various different particle effects. The dungeons have you working your way through multiple different levels or sections until you reach the final boss at the end. Each dungeon has the option of taking up to 3 other players with you, however almost all of the dungeons can be completed solo, at least from level 1 to 20, and especially if you choose Animator as your profession, as you can summon NPC helpers. Higher level dungeons may get significantly harder though. The questing in the game has you completing each dungeon around 3 times before moving on to the next one and advancing the story. Each attempt on a dungeon also costs fatigue points, a system that has carried over from Korea as a limiter to playtime. This system usually limits playtime to around 2 to 3 hours, but can be increased with the purchase of fatigue point potions. The combat systems in the game are pretty standard with mana pools, ability cooldowns, and skill bars. There are some interesting elemental features in the sort of rock, paper, and scissors fashion, including things like fire, light, water, and so on. The game does feel like it relies on enemy overwhelming for its difficulty level rather than actually having singular difficult enemies. Again, this may change at later levels. The combat is fairly fast paced with your abilities having little to no casting times. The enemy's attacks, however, can usually be avoided if you're paying attention due to animation and progress bar build-ups before their abilities actually go off. There's quite a range of different classes and subclasses available for you to choose from, with 9 distinctively different playstyles available and 26 alternate paths to take your character down skill-wise, with an average of 4 subclasses for each main class. Each main class also has a unique character dedicated to it, so while playing, it's easy to tell who is a mage or who is a fighter. Your subclass won't come into play until you reach level 15, where you will then have to choose one and stick to it for the rest of the game. Your skills, however, are a little bit more lenient, as you can change your skill point placement at any time, completely free of any sort of charge, so you can play around with different skill sets to find the combination that suits you best. The next tough decision to make will be what profession your character is going to occupy. There are 4 professions in the game, including Dissembler, Alchemist, Animator, and Enchanter, each profession being extremely important except maybe the Dissembler, as free to use Dissembler machines can be found in the main cities. Crafting is in the game, but isn't as important as it is in some other games, with crafting recipes being extremely rare. You can, however, reconvert 2 magical items into a brand new magical item for a certain class so as to get rid of unwanted and unusable items for something you may actually be able to use. Other features of the game include the usual MMO things like guilds, an auction house, and PvP arenas. You can also take on the role as a mentor for new players to help them out getting started in the game. There's also global events that occur every week, with monsters invading a city or town and players having to band together to defeat the threat. Altogether, Dungeon Fighter Online is a good game to get a couple of friends together or other random players and go dungeon crawling. Being a game from Korea, it does bring some downsides like the fatigue point system, but it's not really the kind of MMO you would really want to spend more than a couple of hours playing anyway, due to dungeon crawling being the only real gameplay to the game. Any longer and it would start to get repetitive. If you're looking for a game that'll run on old PC hardware that is still fun and gives you a ton of character options, Dungeon Fighter Online may be worth a look. Anyway, that's been my player preview for Dungeon Fighter Online. The game will be officially releasing sometime soon. If you want to find out more about the game, check out the links below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.